Welcome back. U.S. presidential climate envoy John Kerry wrapped up his 4-day visit to Beijing today with a meeting with China's vice president. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping saying yesterday that China will decide its own path in reducing carbon emissions and will, quote, never be influenced by other nations. Joining me right now is Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for China Strategy and the author of The 100-Year Marathon, which is a must-read, Michael Pillsbury, back with us. Michael, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Maria.
So assess Xi Jinping's words for us. What was he saying there?
I'm happy to say I predicted this in 100-Year Marathon many years ago, Maria. He's saying that economic growth is more important than helping on climate change. China simply will not agree to Kerry's proposals. They're basically insulting him while he's there to release this kind of material. The basic idea is trust China, trust the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to take our own path, and by 2060, everything will be okay. In the meantime, trust us. Actually, what obviously is happening is the Chinese are seeking concessions from the Biden administration about Taiwan, export controls, investment restrictions. And Kerry is saying, no, let climate change be separate. We'll make a deal on the side. China's simply saying no while he's in Beijing on his visit. So it's a colossal failure. If I were a Biden team member, I'd be embarrassed.
Of course you would. And this is the third colossal failure straight in terms of three people from the administration going to Beijing. I mean, look, when Anthony Blinken was ready to go to China, they spied on his emails, and they got behind the thinking that the administration was doing ahead of Blinken's trip. When Janet Yellen went to Beijing a couple of weeks ago, they released the fact that she ate mushrooms that are psychedelic. Now John Kerry goes, and they release this, we're not going to go by anybody else's rules when it comes to climate, while he's still there. The Chinese Communist Party is making a serious effort to undermine the administration. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's fair. I think that's even generous. If you contrast this with how they treated President Trump, there was no doubt that they respected President Trump. They agreed to negotiations. There were documents to discuss each detail. For example, in the trade talks, it's been revealed both in Bob Lighthizer memoir and in Jared Kushner's memoir just how much of a threat President Trump made directly through intermediaries to the Chinese. You sign this agreement or we're going to really, really hurt you. Last night on Sean Hannity, President Trump again mentioned going to 100% tariffs to get their attention. There's nothing like this happening with the Biden administration. There's simply no negotiations, whether it's nuclear arms, trade, enforcement of fentanyl restraints. Nothing is happening. And in the meantime, they simply try to humiliate these Biden envoys while they're in Beijing.
Yeah. President Trump told me as well, and we're going to run more of this on Sunday, about the fact that he took in $400 billion in taxes and in tariffs from Beijing. But I asked him about putting limitations in place in terms of investing in Chinese companies. The Biden administration apparently continues to leak that it's about to come up with a plan to restrict investments into China, that they're going to be narrowly focused, and they're going to release this plan. We've been hearing about this plan and this leak that they're going to come up with a new policy now for about, I don't know, 6 months at least, but it's not materializing any time. So what are you expecting in terms of a real plan to limit investing in Chinese companies that are tied to the Chinese military? Right now, Americans, unwitting or not, are able to buy companies even on this, if these companies are on the sanctions list, that are Chinese companies tied to the Chinese military.
Well, what the Heritage Foundation is doing, Maria, is producing a kind of scorecard of specific measures, more than 50, that have been talked about by Congress or leaked as possible things the Biden administration might do. And we're trying to show very, very clearly how little is happening. There's almost no legislation you can actually vote on these various issues you mentioned, export controls, restrictions on investment in high tech in China. At the same time, we see the split in the Biden administration, where if you look at Jake Sullivan's speeches, he's quite the China hawk. He's talking about export controls and choking off the high-tech areas that China should not be allowed to surpass us. But then you look at Janet Yellen's speeches, and certainly John Kerry's speeches, it's totally different. It's we have to cooperate with China, we have to get along, share the planet. So there's quite a split, and apparently they cannot get President Biden to make a speech on China's strategy, which he promised when he first came in office. Remember, he said, China will never surpass this on my watch, unquote. He won't give a speech on China's strategy. So they seem to be bickering among themselves. And I can read all about this in the Chinese press. This is covered for the people of China to read, how Biden will not rein in his China policy.
Yeah, just the way
it's very embarrassing.
Yeah, it's very embarrassing. Just the way he will not call China an adversary. He will only call the Chinese Communist Party a competitor. And the White House keeps leaking to Bloomberg. Bloomberg is now saying that officials are aiming to wrap up a proposal by the end of August for the long-delayed program to screen and possibly prohibit investment in China's semiconductor, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence sectors. Let me be clear. We have not seen anything like this materialize, and they don't want to put it in place for over a year anyway. You just mentioned this, and you mentioned the difference between the Biden response to China and the Trump response to China. I spoke with the 45th president last Sunday on Sunday Morning Futures, and here's what he said about China. Watch. Would you be prepared to attack the economic relationship that we have with China? For example, the capital markets are wide open for communist China, and unwitting investors are basically funding the expansion of the CCP. Would you put limits in place in terms of what Americans can buy?
So I did something better. I did tremendous tariffs. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars, tariffs and taxes. So when China, which was just dumping everything into our country, steel and everything. You know, they were dumping steel at a level that was going to put our steel mills out of business, which is what they wanted. I saved the steel industry. We were dead. And I taxed a 50% tax on dumping steel. And then they start sending it through other countries, and we caught them. And they start sending it through Canada.
Meanwhile, Michael, we just had a whole discussion with James Comer, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, who is looking for specific policy changes that Joe Biden made, which could, justify millions of dollars that his family has taken in from communist China. One of those is a memorandum of understanding that Joe Biden signed back in 2014, which allowed Chinese companies to trade on U.S. exchanges but not follow any U.S. auditing rules. So American companies were following the auditing rules. Chinese companies didn't have to.
Well, and what's unusual about that decision, it was done by the vice president when Biden was vice president. Meetings in his office, direct involvement with him personally. This is somewhat strange. Ordinarily, this kind of thing would be handled by a cabinet secretary or the president of the United States, Obama himself. So, but Mr. Comer's problem is, as he well recognizes, he's coming to this investigation very, very late. So the chances of covering things up, or the chances of using what the FBI did against Mr. Trump for the Russia collusion allegation. Remember, there were wiretaps, there were FISA explanations. None of that is happening in this case.
Yeah.
It's these open hearings where somebody has to say something on camera, and the Biden administration has had weeks, if not months, to prepare themselves. Then they're Harvard Law School and Yale Law School graduates, Maria. They're hardly likely to leave a trail of breadcrumbs out for a congressman to discover in open hearings.
Yeah.
So I'm pessimistic that they're going to get anywhere.
Wow.
They're assuming the Biden team is stupid, which I think there may be many things we can say bad about the Biden team, but they're not stupid.
Yeah. Michael, it's great to talk with you as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
All right, Michael Pillsbury.